Do you love eyeshadow palettes? Do you love taking a peek into other people's eyeshadow palette collection? Then if so, stick around, because I am doing my palette roundup of all the palettes I used in the month of April. Wait a minute, you might be thinking. Isn't it a little late in May for an April eyeshadow palette roundup? Yes, yes it is. But it's been a crazy busy month, and better late than never, right? Along those lines, I have kind of a funny story about February's video. I will get into that in just a little bit. One thing you need to know about this series is that when I set it up, I made a rule that after the month was over, any palette that I used in the month had to go into a palette vault. It's really just a basket, but the idea is that I cannot use that palette again until I get through the majority of my stash. I can reach in there if I need a specific palette for a special occasion, but then it has to go back in the vault. I did give myself 3 get out of jail free cards so that each month I can pull 3 palettes from the month and put it back in my inventory to be used in future months. I can use that on the same palette month after month, or I can let one slip into the vault and redeem something else. My hope is that by the end of the year, I will have used every palette in my inventory, and I will know if the lesser used ones are lesser used because I don't like them or because I just forgot about them. This month, I'm actually doing something new, and for the first time, I'm ranking my palettes as well as sharing them with you. I have taken pictures of my looks for most of them, and so I'll be putting those up on one side or the other so that you can see the look that I created and the shades that I used. I used a total of 16 palettes in the month of April. Coming in at number 16 is the Zoeva Caramel Melange palette. I received this palette in friend mail, and it is pretty much just a standard warm neutral palette. I'm going to scoot over so that I make sure that I have room to put the look up here while I'm talking about it. For this look, I started out with this ivory shade as a setting shade from Crease to Brow Bone. Then I went into this deeper shade here, and there are shade names on here, but it's little, it's gold writing, and I can't read it. So I'm just going to point to them. So I went into that one to deepen up the crease in the transition area. I used this really pretty copper shimmer for my outer lid, and then I used this more yellow gold shimmer for the inner lid, and I deepened up the outer V area with this kind of brownish purple that had some little micro glitter flecks in it. And while I think I created a really pretty eye look, this is not a palette I reach for. When I'm looking for warm neutrals, I have other palettes that I like a lot better. And I'm actually almost thinking that I might declutter this one. I had a few other Zoeva palettes that I did declutter in my big eyeshadow palette declutter, and I kept this one, but I think I don't reach for this one because I have others that I like better. So I am considering actually decluttering this palette. Coming in at number 15 were these 2 shadow sticks, one from Sigma in Bubbly and one from Kiko Milano in 05. There isn't anything necessarily wrong with the crayons. I just hardly ever reach for eyeshadow crayons, and I have a declutter of my single eyeshadows, pot eyeshadows, crayons, and eyeshadow primers, I think, that I'm going to be working on. And I keep saying I'm going to be working on it, and I keep pushing it off. But I really need to do that because a lot of my eyeshadow sticks have gotten really dry, and I think of the whole drawer full of them, there are maybe 5 that I'm actually going to keep. These are fine, but in terms of the other palettes that I used, I didn't want to rank them any higher. I don't think I'll get rid of these 2 in particular, but I am going to do a pretty brutal declutter. At number 13 is the Juvia's Place, the Bronzed Rustic palette. And this palette is also a warm neutral, but leaning a little bit more into the yellows and the reds. And I put this here, it could maybe even have been below the shadow sticks, but I'm probably never going to use these 2 shades. The yellow just doesn't look good on with my coloring, and red kind of scares me on my eyes. So I'm actually considering decluttering this. This I did receive in friend mail, and I wanted to give it a try because I do appreciate when I receive things from my friends. But I also know that if I were to send somebody something and they couldn't use it, I would not at all be upset if they passed it along to somebody else. So I do think I'm going to pass this along to somebody whose coloring is more well suited to these tones. Coming in at number 13 is this Viseart Neutral Matte Eyeshadow Palette. I received it from my friend Leanna Dalton, and I like it, but it's an all matte palette, and I never use just all mattes. It's a great companion palette. You know, if you're looking for a cool toned brown or a gray or warm tones or neutrals, it's there. But the palettes that I use generally have those two, so I don't find myself reaching for this. That said, I have no intention of getting rid of this because it is such a great companion palette. When I use this, I actually did combine the shimmers from the e.l.f. Bite Size palette, both of those. I mixed them together and put some shimmer on because I'm just not an all matte eyeshadow kind of girl. So that's why this came in at 13, but even though it's low on the list, I really did like most of the palettes that I used this month, and so it's not going anywhere. Number 12 is the BH Cosmetics Flower Power Palette, and this one is ranked low mainly because these pans are so tiny. It's difficult to get a brush in, it's difficult to use. The tones themselves are beautiful. When I used this, I used Chill, Daisy, Dream, Wild. This is such a pretty purple shimmer. And Peace, this pink shimmer here. And I'm kind of got a purple look going on today, but I used a different palette for it. So I do like this palette. It's just kind of hard to use. And it's, you know, it's very versatile actually because there is this row of neutrals down here on the bottom. Just wish the pans were a little bit bigger. Coming in at number 11, I hope I'm counting right. If I'm not, I will update it with the correct count in a graphic on the screen because sometimes I lose track. Anyway, I used the Colourpop That's Taupe. Now this one had a shade in here that I had to take out because it contained carmine, and I put in a different shade from another palette that was safe for me to use so that I knew I could use everything in the palette. So this shade here is not Boa, the shade that came with it, but I did use that shade. And then I also used Python, Rocksteady, Smoky Eyes, and Slated. And so I ended up with kind of a pinkish neutral for this look. I thought if I marked which ones I couldn't use, that would be good enough, but apparently I just ignore it because I used this one time and forgot that I wasn't supposed to use that shade and did, and then my eyes were bothering me all day long. So I just took that one out and put in a new one. Now that I have done that, I do really enjoy this palette, and it's in this position simply because of the other ones that are above it, not because I don't like it. Coming in at number 10 is the Prism Makeup Interstellar. This is a dupe for, I believe, an Urban Decay palette. I cannot remember which one it is. It's one that I wanted for a really long time, and I'll put it on the screen here because my brain just lost it right now. All right, so for Interstellar, I used Infinite, which is a little bit warmer of a blending shade than normally I would go in with this one. And then Orb, which is also a warm transition shade. I then deepened things up with Apastron. I used Earthly for an outer lid shimmer, and then Orbital on the inner lid to kind of brighten things up. And then I went in with Asteroid for a blending shade to kind of help meld everything together. Coming in at number 9 is my e.l.f. Bite Size palettes, and I have two of them because I use them together. This one is in my Out the Door in 24, and my goal for this one is to completely use up the blending shade, to hit pan in the two shimmers, and to see noticeable use in the dark brown because I use so little of this. It's very dark, it's very pigmented, and I just don't use a lot of it. I used this on 3 different days. I'm only going to show you one look because honestly, when I use these, the look is pretty much identical. There's just not a whole lot of variety that you can do with this, and I'm kind of getting a little bored with it, so probably could have placed it lower in the ranking if I'm being honest. So it's coming in at number 9, but 12 might have been a better placement for it. Number 8 is the Morphe Vava Bloom palette. This is such a pretty pink palette, but also has enough neutrals in there to kind of ground all that pink so that you don't end up looking like you have pink eye. I'm going to cover it with the Interstellar so that I can show you the shades that I used. Since these don't have names, I labeled them A, B, C, and then the columns 1 through 6. So I used A4, which is that pink right there, A3 to kind of deepen it up and make it a little less Barbie pink, C1 to really give some depth in the outer V, B4, which is this super pretty bright pink, C4, which is a little bit more of a coppery color, and then A2 in the inner corner. So I really like this palette. I know Morphe, sometimes the quality is a little bit iffy, but this one I feel like performs really, really well. Coming in at number 7 is a really old palette. If you were around in the like 2017, 2018 YouTube days, everybody was talking about this Milani Soft and Sultry, and I wanted it so much. I waited and waited and waited and finally got it on a really good sale, and it is just a really nice neutral palette. And yes, I have a lot of neutral palettes, but this one kind of has a special place in my heart because it was one of the first fancy palettes that I got, and it's so easy to use. You can just pick a column and go down it, and that's your look, or you can mix and match. I did not write down the shades that I used, but I'm pretty sure that light blending shade, medium transition, deepen up the outer crease, and grab a shimmer, and you're ready to go. Yes, this palette, it has some age on it, but it's still performing well, and so therefore I'm still using it. Number 6 from BH Cosmetics, the Hanging in Hawaii palette. Again, a very warm neutral palette, but just such a good formula on these BH Cosmetics Travel Series palettes. I used my Wet n Wild Brulee first because this doesn't have that matte ivory shade that I like to set from crease to brow bone. I just think that it makes blending so much easier if you use something like that to start with. And if you've watched me do any Get Ready With Me's, you've probably seen me do that 100 times. So I went in with Mauna Kea as a transition shade just to kind of start the gradient. If I butcher these names, I apologize. I'm doing the best I can. And then used Aloha to deepen up the crease and kind of redefine it. I have hooded eyes, so I like to take that crease shade just a little bit higher to make sure you can see it when my eyes are open. I used Waikiki, which is kind of a brassy shimmer on the outer portion of my lid. And then Lanai, which is a little bit lighter in the same color family shade on the inner portion of the lid. I used Mahalo to deepen up the outer V area and Hana as an inner corner highlight. Just love these travel series. Coming in at number 5, I have a Z palette from Makeup Geek. I got this when they were going out of business for $8. And in it, I have my Sydney Grace singles. These I used in combination with another palette that's listed a little bit higher in the ranking, but I wanted to rank these on their own. And the reason that they're at number 5, I love Sydney Grace shadows. The makeup wearer I think I am loves single eyeshadows. In reality, I forget that I have them and I never reach for them. So I did pull these out and use them. They're beautiful. I'm not sure exactly which ones I used and which I haven't. I know that I haven't used these blues or grays yet, but I have used most of these down here and I just love them. They're so pretty. I did discover that this Soulmates I have in a single is also in the Be Mine palette. That's the same pink. And I didn't realize that until I actually used these two palettes together. And I was like, oh, that's the same shade. There is a thunderstorm rolling in. So if you hear thunder, we're getting some weather. And hopefully it won't get severe. We are under a tornado watch until about 10 p.m. tonight. So if I have to leave suddenly to go to the basement, I will leave suddenly, I guess. Anyway, so my Sydney Grace singles come in at number 5. I haven't forgotten that I have a story to tell you about February. I'll get there. I want to get through these first. Number 4 is my Sigma Untamed palette. And this one I have kept the Shade Saver because I think it's just so cool. I normally do not keep those, but I did for this one. And this is just a beautiful palette. There are a wide variety of looks you can get with this palette. The shades are lovely. In some respects, it kind of feels a little bit more like a fall palette with these greens and gold in here, but then the pinks and purples make it feel like spring and summer. It's really one that I would reach for year round. I might vary what I use based on the season, but it is just gorgeous. When I use this, no surprise, I started with Docile and then went to Instinct. And then I came down to these lavenders and used Moxie and Fierce. This is so pretty. I mean, it's just so pretty. Oh. And then I actually used Wicked and stamped that as an eyeliner on my lash line. And it's a really, really good black for an eyeliner. So I'm excited to play with this more. However, I don't know if it's one I'm going to use one of my 3 get out of jail free cards on. So we'll see. It might have to go in the vault. We are ready for the top 3. Number 3 is one that I received in friend mail from my friend Katie. I'll have her channel linked down below. And it is the Sydney Grace Tiny Marvels palette. This is one that I had on my list that I was planning to buy at the Christmas in July sale. So when Katie contacted me and asked me if it was something that I would be able to use and would I want it, I immediately said yes and have said thank you over and over because it is gorgeous. And this is the palette. And the reason it's at number 3 is because I just really haven't had much time to play with it. I've done 2 looks with it, and I will give you those up here and like cycle through them while I'm talking about it. The first look I did, I went pretty conservative and just kind of did a mauve look just to kind of play with the formula. And I used Lovebug, Bugaboo, Marvel, and Web for that look. And then I decided to get a little adventurous, and the next day when I used it, I used Mantis, Walking Stick, Fire Butts. This is such a gorgeous shimmer. It looks gold in the pan, but when you put it on, it has this green flip. Oh my gosh, it is so pretty. And then Scarab on the outer lid. And this look was just stunning. So there's a lot here that I haven't played with and that I want to play with. So I'm very excited to have this palette. And it came in at number 3. Number 2 is the Lamora Nude eyeshadow palette. I used this on 2 different days. The first day I didn't take a picture. And then the second one, you've got the look here. I used the Wet n Wild Brulee because this doesn't have that ivory blending shade that I like to use. Then I went in with Toasty, Cocoa, Ember, and Aurora, and just got the prettiest everyday neutral look. I really like this palette. It is a smaller alternative to the Natasha Denona I Need a Nude palette. I can't use Natasha Denona because she uses carmine in her shades, and this one is vegan. It's also much, much cheaper. Got it on Amazon. When I got it, it was like $10.99, but then shortly after it went up to $14.99, so I'm not sure what the price is right now, but I love this palette. It is so pretty, and the formula is really good. So that came in at number 2. Oh, I actually used this a third day. When I used it this day, I went in with Tree Hopper and then Death Moth, which gives more of a kind of a mustardy base. And then I used Scarab, Fire Butts, and Web for my shimmers again. And so that look is there. Sorry, I missed that one. And now the number 1 palette that I used in the month of April, the Sydney Grace Be Mine palette. This is just so pretty. It is so my jam. I mean, these shades, when I don't know what I want to do, I could reach for this palette and create a look that I would be completely happy with. And as I said before, I use this palette in conjunction with the singles in the Makeup Geek palette that I showed you just a little bit ago. I think I have used every shade in this palette. I'm not exactly sure, but I think I have. And unfortunately, while I have the looks, I love all of the looks that I create with this. All right, so those are the 16 palettes / crayons that I used in the month of April. And now I have to figure out which ones I'm going to use my 3 get out of jail free cards on. And it looks like it's going to be a Sydney Grace sweep this month because I am going to redeem my Sydney Grace singles. I really want to use this lavender shade that's in there. And I would also like to kind of get into these deeper blues and grays. They're not quite what I'm looking for when I'm pulling together a summer look, but I still want to play with them anyway. Definitely want to play around with the Tiny Marvels some more, so I'm not ready for that one to go away. And then the Be Mine needs to stick around. I think when I use this, this will probably always be one that I redeem unless there's just 3 more that I love more than this. But I don't know because I like it a lot. So those are my 3 rescued palettes, and the rest of them are going to get put away, and I will not use them again until I get through most of the palettes in my collection. Now, I am getting close to getting through the palettes that I have in my inventory. Typically use between 14 and 17 palettes a month. I don't do my makeup every single day, and I often use a palette more than once. A few more months of this, and I really do think that I'm going to get through every palette in my collection, which is my goal for this series. So what is the story that I've been holding out telling you? Well, it has to do with February's video. You may have noticed that there is no February video. I've talked about the February palette roundup in other videos, and I went to link it recently, and it wasn't anywhere on my channel. And I couldn't figure out why it wasn't anywhere on my channel. Why would YouTube delete one of my videos? YouTube didn't delete one of my videos. Apparently, I filmed that video. I even mostly edited that video. And then I have no idea what happened, but my brain got pulled in a different direction apparently, and I abandoned that video and never finished it. Didn't finish editing it and never put it up on my YouTube channel. So now I need to ask you guys to give me some advice. Should I just chalk it up to menopause brain and leave it be and not put it up and have an incomplete series? Or should I take a little bit of time, finish the edit, and put it up anyway, maybe do a different intro so that I can explain why I'm putting up a February video in May or perhaps June, but then have the complete series? Because, I mean, there were some great palettes that I used in February that, you know, somebody might like to see and see which ones I redeemed and all that kind of stuff, the looks I created. So let me know. It's going to matter when I first put it up, but really the way YouTube works, it's just kind of like a big search engine library anyway. And so for the people who come back and see it maybe a month from now or 6 months from now, they're not going to know that it was out of order unless they look at the date. So what do you think? Move on, forget it, it's in the past, leave it in the past, or go ahead and put it up because what the heck, it's already almost done anyway. Let me know what you think about my bungled video. And also, if you enjoyed this video, take a second, hit that like button. I would really very much appreciate it. I'm going to put a couple of videos for you there. I hope y'all have a beautiful, blessed day. See you in the next one. Bye-bye.